Who is the most favourable of the party leaders? And, oh, how very, very strange. We find that Nigel Farage is now more popular with the British public than Keir Starmer, Ed Davey, Rishi Sunak, and certainly more popular than any of the current Conservative leadership candidates who most of the country have never, ever even heard of. Now,
something is changing. I'm confident of this, There is a revolution coming to the UK. Slippery Starmer, in just 99 catastrophic days, has failed. The alternative is becoming clear. And in places you least expect, like this result in Scotland overnight, where they beat the Tories for a council seat. Wow. And remember, the reform revolution has only been rolling for 4 months. Yet Nigel Farage has now proven he is, quote, the most popular party leader in the country. And he's got the receipts to back it up, folks.
It's a funny old thing, the media. Here's one of today's headlines. Keir Starmer, now as unpopular as Nigel Farage. Goodness gracious me, how low can you sink? This must be absolutely awful. Big headlines from a YouGov poll published yesterday. But there's another way of looking at it. Who is the most favourable of the party leaders? And, oh, how very, very strange. We find that Nigel Farage is now more popular with the British public than Keir Starmer, Ed Davey, Rishi Sunak, and certainly more popular than any of the current Conservative leadership candidates who most of the country have never, ever even heard of. Now, of course, I'm delighted to be the most favoured, the most popular party leader in the country. But believe me, this is certainly not just about me. It's about our 5 MPs, the work they're doing. It's about our growing membership. 90,000. We're up over 80,000 from this time last year, and it's growing quickly. People paying their 25 quids, getting on board, organising themselves in branches, getting ready to fight English County Council elections, Welsh Parliament, Scottish Parliament. We're gearing up, we're doing well. And of course, we stand for the right things. We can't have Albanians that have been deported twice from Britain, driving around London in 300 grand Ferraris, sticking 2 fingers up to the country. And we'll never deal with any of this stuff unless we leave the ECHR. And we're the only party committed to that and actually believes in that.
The only party so far. Anyway, and look, I observe this stuff very closely, and I do believe the tectonic plates in Conservative politics are changing. So, very small example of that, but in the past, Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, would only appear on my old GB News show, but never the other primetime hit hosted by one Nigel Farage. Last night, that changed.
But I do think this reflects a broader and more profound issue on campus and indeed throughout society where, if you're on the centre-right, if you're a Conservative, if you're pro-Israel, if you want to talk about, certain issues, if you want to talk about immigration, about controlling immigration, you are branded far right, and these far left extremists who are frankly out of control because of craven authorities and appeasement, frankly, by those who have power, have become bullies, and they're silencing students on campus, they're silencing academics, and they're creating a very chilling atmosphere whereby freedom of speech is being snuffed out.
How do we get the pendulum to swing back the other way, or do we have to live with this?
Well, maybe one way to do that is the two of you uniting. And personally, I think Superwoman Suella should jump ship to reform, where she is the shadow Home Secretary they desperately need. So far, she's been quiet on the Tory leadership race, where Robert Jenrick, who I believe will and should win, is targeting Farage by talking tough.
By shadowing Farage, of just being a sort of pale imitation, why not just vote Farage?
Well, firstly, the reason Nigel Farage is saying those things is because he's rattled. He is worried.
Is he?
He is worried.
Doesn't look that rattled.
Well, he's talking about me a lot. And he's worried that having a leader of the Conservative Party with my track record and with the policies and agenda that I stand for will be very difficult for them. It will make them redundant because we'll suck the oxygen away from them. And we will be the serious party that is intent on securing our borders, tackling crime, strong defences, the things that reform voters care about. But also, The polling suggests that in addition to that, bringing home those reform voters back to their natural home, the Conservative Party,
Is it their
I am
natural home?
best
Do you-
placed, I am best placed to bring back the Lib Dem and the Labour voters. And that is what's important, because we've got to be that broad church. We've got to get back into
But isn't the
government.
problem,
that
though,
means
that-
bringing people back from all over the political spectrum.
But as Nigel has said, it's tough to out Farage. And his political takedowns of both Tory contenders has been brutal, but I have to be honest, brilliant. He dismantled Kemi Badenoch in just 12 seconds.
I'm pretty confident that if it's Kemi Badenoch, she'll fall flat on her face pretty quickly. She's one of the most inconsistent politicians in Westminster. What she says and what she does are two very different.
But perhaps for good reason, it takes him 3 times as long to explain why Jenrick is the wrong choice ultimately.
He appears to be a convert to my kind of politics. He now gives speeches walking around the stage, but you need Robert the charisma to carry it off. If you want lessons in being Nigel Farage, I promise you I don't charge that much money for doing it. But I tell you what, if he sticks to this, if he wins with the membership, which he may well do, on this issue of the ECHR, he will find over half his parliamentary party viscerally opposed to it. And my guess is that Jenrick, if he wins, he might make a brave stab at it on policy, but they'll do for him within a year.
So if Farage's YouGov polling continues as it is, I think we're about to enter a new era of Farage, the establishment slayer. And I have to say, I am here for it. But now it's time for our Friday Superstar panel. And I am absolutely delighted today to welcome in the political commentator Alex Armstrong and the host of X Uncensored Sunday Nights on Elon Musk's platform, Charlie Sansom, the birthday boy. Happy birthday, Charlie.
Happy birthday to me. Yes, thank you very much.
And I'm very sorry for forgetting yesterday. But Alex, what do you reckon? Nigel Farage now the most popular party leader in the country. Is this a big deal?
I'm not surprised, if I'm being honest with you, Dan. I mean, let's look at the caliber of party leaders that we've got. I mean, currently, Rishi Sunak, one of the most unpopular modern prime ministers. He's still leader of the Conservative Party. Let's not forget that. On the opposite side, you've got Keir Starmer. Again, probably even more unpopular than Rishi Sunak was when he called the election. So realistically, it's not a tough competition if we're being fair. But in terms of Nigel Farage, well, he's sweeping up votes because people are looking around the political spectrum and saying, who is actually talking any sense? Who is putting forward policies that British people actually want to have enacted in our country? And that's Nigel Farage. He's talking about very sensible things. And let's get real. As much as I really do like the fact that the Tories are starting finally to shift to the right, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch are only coming to this sort of moral dignity of realizing that immigration is too high now. It's taken them all this time to realize that we should leave the ECHR, that we should tighten up immigration. Let's not forget Kemi Badenoch in Parliament said that she accepted the fact she wanted more people to come over here on visas. So, you know, I'm not surprised, Dan. I'm not surprised. I welcome it. I think we're going to see reform do exceptionally well over the next few years. The real question is, will Jenrick be able to keep his party together? Will he be able to realistically take the Conservative Party to the right and keep it there? And I don't know in the long run, no matter how many great things that he's saying, how many things that I agree with, and I do agree with him on a lot of things today, but how long will he last? You know, there's already rumours online that he'll be the next IDS. And I think Nigel Farage has really taken this space. He's taken the right-wing space. He owns it. And for that, people are giving him the credit he deserves, which is a man sticking by his principles.
Charlie, you're not as certain as Alex and I. Is it fair to say?
That would be fair to say. I'm not in total agreement with what Alex has said. I do empathise with his perspective because I think it's more hopeful than pragmatic, or even realistic, because I see Robert Jenrick sounding more like Nigel Farage than what Nigel Farage sounds like. So whilst Nigel makes these quips that he'll give out lessons to Jenrick about how to be more like him, let's think about this. At least Robert Jenrick is saying he's committed to deportation. I haven't heard Nigel say that. That's something that would appeal to his base.
Well, he
So
said
if
the
the
opposite,
Conservatives
actually.
get ground,
He said he's not committed to mass deportations.
Robert Jenrick said he's not committed.
No, sorry, Farage.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making. Yeah, like Nigel's not for it, but Robert Jenrick has said he'll deport 100,000 illegal migrants and get the net figure down to 10,000. Look, I know we've heard it all before. We are very unhappy Conservatives. I get that. Most Conservative voters are unhappy because they're not Conservative. But if he was to pull this off, it's a massive win for the Tories. And Nigel even needs to catch up to that reality, or he's going to get taken over by a party which he should be demolishing right now.
Because, Charlie, on a personal level, you were a member of the Conservative Party. You quit as a result of their lockdown policies, which I completely understood. But if Jenrick is going to outflank Farage on the right and promise mass deportations as part of his policy prescription, would that potentially woo you back into the Tory fold?
It's a lovely idea, and it's a question that I get asked very often. The answer is no. I've been asked to come back to the Conservative Party multiple times by multiple different politicians, and I've always said no based on the COVID stuff. Those people that enacted those lockdowns, the attempt at vaccine mandates, the attempt at vaccine passports, most of them are still there. So there's no way I'd go back under this form of a Conservative Party. If you get rid of them all, and it's a complete clear out and a fresh start, maybe. But it's a big maybe.
No, exactly. And that's why, and I'm sure, Alex, you agree, that's why at the moment, reform isn't perfect. No political party is perfect. But as Farage said in that clip that I played in the digest, he does actually believe in this. Leaving the ECHR, that's in his core. He's fought for this for decades.
Yeah, I mean, look, Nigel Farage has been the anchor of the Conservative Party. He has moved that party more than any politician has in decades. I mean, let's not forget UKIP. You know, if it wasn't for UKIP existing, we never would have had a referendum on the EU, and that is thanks to Nigel Farage. The same as the Brexit election with Boris Johnson. Johnson never would have had that majority if it were not for Nigel Farage. And we see what happens in British politics when Nigel Farage gets involved. He is responsible for demolishing the Tories in the last election. It's his rhetoric and his commitment to his values that people actually look at and say, well, that's a man I know I can trust with my vote, because he has, on the record multiple times, said that his policy stance hasn't changed. So I think that's something that he has that no other politician in this country has. And look, when it comes to mass deportations, Nigel Farage's point was pretty clear. He said that actually it can't happen. And it can't happen for multiple reasons. One, because the civil service would need to get behind it. We need to start with that first. Not only that as well, but there's got to be appetite amongst the vast majority of British people for that to happen. And there's also, you know, a very nuanced perspective when we talk about mass deportations. Robert Jenrick's talking about deporting 100,000 people. Well, let's not forget Tony Blair used to do that. That's Blairite policy. So we have to put this all into perspective. We've lost perspective because our political class for the last 15 years have ignored the will of the people to reduce immigration and not deal with this
creep to the left. Because I'm sorry, the Conservative Party ended as a centre-left party, actually a party to the left of New Labour. But breaking right now, perhaps the only person who can stop Nigel Farage's charge to number 10, one Boris Johnson, who is very much on the comeback trail. So former Spectator editor Fraser Nelson had this piece in today's Daily Telegraph. It's headlined, "I've glimpsed the next Conservative psychodrama, the return of Boris. November 2nd may not mark the end of the Tories' leadership traumas. An ex-PM still has ambitions." And I think it's worth me sharing with you some of what Fraser Nelson writes. So he says, "The idea of a Boris restoration may sound like fantasy, but the seemingly impossible has been happening rather a lot in politics lately. And in this era of comebacks from Michel Barnier to Donald Trump, it's unwise to rule anything out or assume that the current Tory leadership battle will be the final say on who leads the party into the next election." Then he says, if Reform UK continues to grow in support and Tory polling fails to break through the 30% mark, then you can see what a re-elected Boris might argue, that only he can see off Farage just as he did in 2019, reassemble the grand coalition of voters. His case would be stronger if Jenrick wins, adopts Farageist policies and still gets nowhere. But Fraser Nelson adds, then again, Britain tends not to forgive its politicians. David Cameron's exhumation can hardly be seen as a great success. They must come back in different forms. Tony Blair is now a successful lobbyist. Rory Stewart, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Ed Balls are part-time broadcasters. George Osborne is a part-time financer and recently helped sell The Spectator, which is now edited by Michael Gove. But such resurrections happen outside politics. Those in Westminster seldom work. So I think what we've got going on here, Charlie, is a personality issue versus a politics issue. Because I completely sign up to the fact that politics-wise, in the end, Boris, who I always give huge credit for delivering Brexit, and I think he goes down in history as the man who was able to get that through Parliament. And, you know, I'm personally a fan of Boris. I know, Charlie, like you, I'm going to be reading Unleashed, the book, today. But politics-wise, by the end of his reign, he had moved too far to the left. He wasn't dealing with the big issues like immigration. He was behind nut zero. So that's the politics. But the personality, Charlie, is that Boris gets forgiven on a lot of that policy stuff. And if he returns to the fold, that is the biggest genuine threat to Nigel Farage, is it not?
I believe so. And I think that Boris is one of those people where he is hard to dislike. I've got grievances with some of his handling of COVID, obviously. We discussed that a moment ago. But him personally, I find him extremely entertaining and I find him fascinating to listen to. I think he's brilliant to hear talk, even if he does mumble and stumble around his words. One thing I would say about the Fraser Nelson article that you just quoted from there is that Fraser is either being disingenuous or he's made a mistake by saying that Boris saw off Nigel. Nigel made a deal to give Boris the 2019 general and not compete against him. And when it comes to politicians that aren't forgiven, even before we started doing the show today, me and Alex were talking off air saying that we actually don't mind some of the things that Tony Blair is saying. That goes to show you how far the right has fallen if me and Alex are saying that Tony Blair is suddenly a good egg.
I'd take his 1997 tax policy. Look, just before you weigh in, Alex, I want to show you, because Charlie's referring to those great Boris moments, and he had another one with Stig Abel on Times Radio, who was having a go at him, somewhat ironically, given Stig Abel admits himself that he's a scruffy dresser. I used to work with him, that is true, but he's having a bit of go at him about being a scruffy dresser. And Boris does what Boris always does and manages to, in a fun way, turn it around to attack Keir Starmer over Lord Ali. Watch this.
You are a scruffy git, Boris Johnson. You're known for being a scruffy git.
I would rather be a scruffy git than take suits paid for by a Labour donor who was then given a pass to number 10.
So explain
worth thousands and thousands of pounds,
Boris,
and then not hand the money back when you're exposed.
People will be aware of that political point. Have people said to you, come on, Boris Johnson, you're too scruffy to be Prime Minister. Sort your act out. Has anyone ever said that to you?
You, Stig, from your vantage point, your the moral high ground that you claim in your black T-shirt.
So you're saying no one's ever...
Your scruffy jeans.
So you're saying no one's ever said...
Your basebole boots, that only you have felt sufficiently impersonate.
No one's ever said to you, you're too scruffy.
Nobody.
In your life?
Not a single.
Never
not
once
a
in your
single
life.
Conservative matron.
Even your missus. Even your wife.
Nobody has said that. And by the way, you are scruffist. You are discriminating against those. I think that you are in danger of being prejudiced, not just against those who want freedom and independence and believe in Britain. I think you are clearly scruffist. You discriminate against people who through no particular fault of their own find that their back is so configured that their shirt comes out of the back of their trousers. And there will be many people who think that that's unfair and elitist and wrong, particularly from somebody who is not making any particular effort, as far as I can see, to wear a tie himself. And I repeat my point in case he missed it earlier. I would rather be a scruff than take suits from Lord Ali, or indeed allow my wife's clothes to be bought by some other guy and then not hand the money back when you're exposed. I think it's ridiculous.
Alex, don't you miss him?
He is absolutely brilliant, isn't he? And I think this is, you're going back to what Charlie was saying. He is a threat. He's a threat to every politician. This is why Sue Gray and Keir Starmer were so keen to get him out of Parliament, because he is so charismatic. He's funny. He's relatable, even though he's not on on an elite level. Boris is one of the most famous people in the country, but he's so relatable. He's funny, and he's just able to even if you have political disagreements with him, which I have many, watching that, I'm like, gosh, I really do miss him. And it's ridiculous to say that, but he has that. He is what I would say the British Trump in many ways. Trump does so well in America because he is relatable. He does just say it as he sees it. And people love that because politicians in our country for so long have been so robotic and so corporatist that they don't have, you would think that they were robots. They don't have any humanity. Boris shows his humanity. He shows his personal side. And Farage is quite similar. He's a little bit more hard hitting, but those two guys together would be the ultimate weapon in any election. You can imagine what a party with Nigel Farage.
And of course, that is the discussion, isn't it? But who would be the PM and who would be the deputy? Given Nigel sees a realistic path to number 10, should he really have to play second fiddle to Boris Johnson? Boris Johnson obviously sees a Churchillian comeback because we all remember Churchill booted out after World War II, somewhat harshly, actually, by the British public. I think it's fair to say, given what he did to beat Hitler, but then did make that return in the years before his death. But look, whoever leads the Conservative Party, they've got real trouble because of these awful wets, these awful Tory wets who I think actually just need to go and join the Liberal Democrats finally.
100%.
F off out of this party because it is not yours. But look at this, front page of the Daily Telegraph today.
Can I nominate somebody to go to the Liberal Democrats first of all?
Oh, sure.
Albion Ancona.
Well, he is backing Kemi Badenoch. Actually, he is backing Kemi Badenoch, which I think for some people has been a sign of I'm not going to back Kemi. But look, front page of the Daily Telegraph today. Tory centrists warn they may bin leadership ballots. Cleverly supporters claim they will spoil their votes after their surprise exit of their contender. And the story reads, moderate Conservatives threatening to throw away their ballots. One supporter of James Cleverly said moderate members told him they were putting their ballot papers in the bin. But look, Alex, these are the people who need to get in the bin. These are the people who need to leave the Conservative Party because they are not conservative.
Yes, and it's not just the supporters, the members, but it's the people in CCHQ. Let's not forget they're the ones who select who gets put into a seat. They're the ones who run all of the back end of the show, which is the real circus that has been the Conservative Party for the last 10 years. They're the ones that need to go before anyone else does, because that party will never change while the wets are running the back shop. Now, the supporters and the members, I watched a lot of Tory party conference, and you just saw this massive swell of support for Tom Tugendhat. And I was sitting there thinking, gosh, this is a man who is pretty wet. I mean, putting him as Conservative Party leader would hand reform decades of power, in my opinion. But, I could not agree more with you, Dan. That is the only way the Conservatives will ever be conservative again is when they say, actually, this is no longer what our party stands for. But will they do that? I don't know.
Well, look, if Jenrick wins, it's going to be really interesting because he is insisting that he's not going to move the party to the centre. And in this new interview with The Sun's Harry Cole overnight, he has been very, very clear. I'm going to show you the clip. He has been very clear that if these moderate wets, these One Nation wets, refuse to agree to back leaving the ECHR, then they're out. They're out of the party. Now, is it just tough talk? I don't know, but have a look at what he had to say.
One example, it's your headline sort of flagship policy to leave the ECHR without a referendum. Just do it, make it party policy, make it happen. Will you require, should you win, every single member of your shadow cabinet to agree to that before you give them a job?
Well, I want to use this leadership election to have a mandate for that. So the membership will, I hope, support me in this because they understand how important it is to get a grip on this. And then it will be added to the stable of Conservative Party policies.
But would you allow, your shadow cabinet ministers not to sign up to that flagship issue and serve in your team?
Well, I want a broad church, but we've got to have a common creed. We've got to have a sense of what does the party actually believe in. And that would be one of our party's policies. Absolutely. So if we win the next election, we do it on a manifesto that commits to that. And so anyone who stands at that election obviously would be supporting
So every
that policy.
candidate at the 2029 election, or whatever it's going to be, would have to sign up to the generic mantra of leave the ECHR.
Yeah, it will be one of our policies at that election.
Well, that's going to be an issue, though, isn't it? Because lots of your MPs, your colleagues, don't want to leave the ECHR. In fact, they did quite a lot, it seems, yesterday to try and stop you going through to the members' votes purely on that issue that they don't want to have this fight.
Well, firstly, I don't agree with that. I think that there is now a growing consensus that the ECHR is just not working in the interests of the British people. You see that now. By even my opponents in this contest have said that we need to reform it. My point is that reform is impossible. In fact, it's a fantasy. There's 46 member states, from Andorra to Iceland to Turkey. You're never going to get agreement between them all as to what we should do to fix this. So you've got to leave. It's leave or remain. I'm for leave.
I'm for leave too. Charlie, I think it's a really effective message. I mean, God knows what happens, though, when he actually becomes leader. And all you need is, I think they've upped it now to a third of the parliamentary party to spark a leadership contest. And actually, given most of the parliamentary party is pretty wet, that could happen very quickly.
Well, the Conservatives will do what they do best, which is pretending that they're your friend and then putting the knives out when your back is turned. So he won't last long. One thing I would say, just to kind of dispel any hope that you might get from Robert Jenrick, those who are watching the show today, is that the Conservatives committed to us a reduction in immigration. They haven't done that ever. And now they want to commit to ripping up legislation like the ECHR to make it more possible, when even the Rwanda scheme was opposed by some members of the Conservative Party. So they're not unified on immigration. For some reason, they want more, and I don't get it. I will never understand why they want this open door. They're just like Labour, and I think that voting for the Conservatives in any sense will be a waste of a vote.
Breaking right now, Scandal Starmer, whose big secret is still being covered up by the mainstream media and the Westminster elite. Let's just think about that. He's joking about it in Parliament. All of the journalists are talking about it. All of the special advisors are talking about it. All of the civil service members are talking about it, but they don't think you should know. I just want to put that out there. But Starmer, to take care, he is very quickly losing friends. Because even Stephen Fry, big-time Labour supporter, had slammed his first 100 days in office as disastrous. Watch this.
He's been a big Labour man, a pro-Labour man.
Yeah.
What do you think about the first 100 days? Haven't gone exactly as you'd expected.
Disastrous. I mean, it does seem extraordinary, doesn't it? Because you think you're in opposition, you've got a bit of time to get things together. You're not sure when an election will be called. It was slightly earlier than anybody imagined, as we know, in the famous rain-swept scenes in Downing Street. But the one thing you do is you say, look at what happened. Look at what happened with Boris and everyone else, the SPADs, you know, the special advisors, the civil service, Dominic Cummings, all these people. Look at the infighting. It is a mystery that they could have allowed themselves to get into this mess. And then this, of course, only highlights the policy, hiccups. I mean, they'll start talking about the blob before long, because obviously Treasury and civil servants will say, well, I understand, Minister, you want to do this, but here are the problems. And they go, all I hear from you are problems.
I mean, Alex Armstrong, when you've lost Stephen Fry in 100 days. This guy ain't doing 5 years, is he? There's no way Starmer survives 5 years.
I cannot see it. I really can't. I mean, look, the first 100 days of this Labour government, as Stephen Fry rightly said, and I very, very rarely agree with him, it has been an unmitigated disaster. We've had the starting off with winter fuel payments all the way through to Sue Gray, his chief of staff that he heralded as he brought her in, being sacked. Now she doesn't even have a job, and we don't know what's going on with her severance pay and all this nonsense. It has been an unmitigated disaster in Number 10 behind closed doors, as well as on the front benches as well. So I cannot see a world where Labour, as a party with a majority who've only just got into power after being sent to the backwash for 14 years, are going to want to lose the next election. And I think you're going to see a challenge by someone like Angela Rayner, who's being very, very quiet as of late. I don't know if you've noticed, but I think you'll see that challenge happen in the next couple of years. But I think to do that, some big stories will have to break down. And I think you know which ones I'm talking about. And once the Reverend Starmer, the man of probity and who sat on his high horse for so long, is finally brought down to reality where he should be, I think the public will turn against him.
Well, the thing that outraged me this week, because I know what these people in the Westminster swamp are like, they laugh at us. They laugh at ordinary folk. They treat us like fools. But I was absolutely dumbfounded that Starmer decided in PMQs to make a joke about the scandals that he is hiding. In case you missed it, this is what happened.
Prime Minister. Well, I'm not sure just at the moment going to something that's labelled temptations is quite where I'd like to go.
I mean, Charlie Sansom, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
I mean, it's my kind of humour, so I did find that quite funny. I can't lie to you, but it don't look good. You are right; it doesn't look good. I think he doesn't have much self-awareness, does he, dear old Keir? And like you said earlier on, when reality hits him, it's going to be, the shock that he needs, as Alex was saying, rather. I don't know. I find this all a bit theatrical. Me personally, I'm not actually that bothered about Keir's scandals because unless he's a murderer, a rapist, or a paedophile, I'm not entirely sure what we're worried about. If he's, the country's in disarray, the country's in bad shape. We shouldn't really be concerned about this right now. Maybe when the sun is shining, we can care about his private life.
Well, the thing is, I do respect that position. I actually do respect that position. What my issue is hypocrisy. And the thing is, Alex, we had 5 years where the Labour Party, led by Keir Starmer, weaponised Boris Johnson's private life day after day after day. He was asked about it constantly. Now, given he's now laughing in Parliament about these so-called temptations, why does a journalist not just ask him? Why does a Westminster journalist not just ask him? Do you have anything to hide? We're all hearing these rumours about the fact that the reason that you went to stay at Lord Arley's very expensive apartment before the election was not because of your son's GCSEs, as you've said, but it was something to do with your personal life. Surely you just want to clear this up once and for all, because you just know, Alex, if it was Boris Johnson, they would have asked.
Well, I think it's rather embarrassing for the mainstream media, whose responsibility this is to report the news. And their current line behind the scenes is that this is not in the public interest, in air quotes. And that's why one of the main reasons, not just the only, but one of the main reasons why they're not publishing this story or asking Keir Starmer about this story. Now, as you said, Dan, Boris Johnson didn't get away with it. Multiple other politicians had their private lives splashed on the front pages. And so it seems to me there's this sort of collusion amongst the mainstream media to keep this quiet. And I think it might have something to do with the fact that they helped get this man into power and now seem to be concerned that they might have to bring down the very man they've put on a pedestal. Now, Keir Starmer laughing about this in Parliament, to me, shows utter contempt for the British public. Utter contempt. If it was Boris laughing at the dispatch box, he'd be sat on the other side saying, this isn't a laughing matter, and making a complete and utter circus of it all. And so the reality is, and the British public will see straight through this, when this story does drop, they will see straight through this, and these clips will be brought up again. Let's face it, Dan, you're probably one of the first people ever in this country to break a story and put those videos out there with that context. And they'll be brought back up in the future. And the British public will look at him and say...
Mainstream media ignored it. I mean... I only saw GB News cover it. This happened in PMQs. I mean, it wasn't a private discussion. I mean, he has now made it public. If any Westminster journalist had any respect for themselves and their profession, do you know what? They could simply ask Keir Starmer if they're scared about doing anything else for legal reasons, because I know there are legal threats. Of course there are. But why don't they just say, Keir Starmer, you laughed about temptations in PMQs on Wednesday. What specifically were you referring to in terms of temptations and an apartment? There's one way. Now, for people who don't know, by the way, there are two other people who I should give credit to, Isabel Oakeshott, the independent journalist, and Paul Staines from Guido Fawkes, who have also done great work on this story and are doing their best to put it in the public domain. And Paul Staines, here on Outspoken last week, went as far as he could just to try and give you an understanding about what is really going on here. Or are you under pressure legally not to reveal more?
Well, you know, we've both been in the game a long time. You know the rules. If you can't stand it up completely, you can't run the story. So we have a name, as do the Mail and the Telegraph. We have a birth certificate, and people have been looking into it. People have been journalists have contacted the family. So it's in play, and a lot of people do know it.
It is in play. I understand why people might not want to put the name out at this point, the birth certificate. But I guess what my point is, Alex, is there's enough now to at least ask Starmer, give him an opportunity in a public platform, because his reaction would be very telling. Give him an opportunity. If this is not true, just deny it. He can deny it.
Yeah, he certainly can. He certainly could. No, he could. Look at that interview. I think, first of all, a good judge of this is look at the interview he did with Beth Rigby and what her comments were afterwards, how she felt after that interview. She said he was furious with me. He was visibly angry, and it made her feel really uncomfortable. And I think this says something about the way Keir Starmer's been dealing with the press, and maybe why they're terrified to ask him, because, you know, he is a lawyer. Let's not forget, he's taken a lot of very high profile people down. I'm sure he's weaponizing his position and he's weaponizing all of his mates in the civil service to be protecting him. But journalists should get a backbone. They should ask him. They have no problem delving into the private lives of multiple politicians, foreign and internal, people from America as well. They have no problem putting that on the front pages, but Keir Starmer seems to be above it all. I want to know why. I really respect Paul Staines and Isabel Oakeshott for doing this. I also really respect Lord Ashcroft, who actually originally wrote about this in the book that I think Paul started digging from. So there are some really, really tough journalists out there who are willing to put their asses on the line, but they can only go so far. The mainstream media do need to support them if they're going to put this out there. And that's exactly what Isabel and Paul are doing. They're goading the media, saying, come on, do it. And until someone does, the mainstream media, we'll never get anywhere.
Yeah, and Lord Ashcroft is investigating it still because he's got an update of his book coming. I think it's the biography of someone. I'm pretty sure it's called The Red Knight, but he's updating it for paperback. So that's still to come. Andrew Pearce has not specifically referred to the rumours, but has said that the talk of Ashcroft's new book has caused jitters within Number 10. But the thing is, there's just a drip of sleaze. Even if you want to take it away from the personal life issues. I mean, look at this new revelation, Charlie, about David Lamy. £10,000, apparently. Or 9,000, sorry, I'll be accurate because it's important. £9,614 27p to redecorate and repaint his office. Now, again, I have no problem with that personally, but what I have a problem with is that, if this had been a Tory minister, Labour would have driven it to the top of the news agenda. When it's them doing it, spending our money like that to live a nice life, to get some new wallpaper. I mean, do you remember how much they talked about Carrie Johnson's wallpaper? And that was paid for by a Tory donor so that taxpayers didn't have to pay. And it was for the property in number 11 Downing Street.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying there. Just to touch on the Keir Starmer point, I would say that I don't believe that ministers' families should be brought into politics unless, of course, they do it themselves. That's just a personal belief of mine. I know people have a different viewpoint. Going on to what David Lamy has done with the decorating of his ministerial office, look, I would like to see the itemised billing of that close to 10 grand bill, because there's no way paint costs 10 grand. There's no way a few picture frames and a few ornaments here and there cost 10 grand. It just doesn't. No one spends 10 grand putting a desk up and getting a computer and whacking a bit of paint on the wall. What I see with ministers and government in general is they think that they've got an endless amount of money coming in because we've got no choice but to pay taxes. And it's like, okay, well, we've got all the money. We'll just spend it on this and spend it on that. But you can guarantee that he wouldn't spend 10 grand on his own home office. If he was in a different job and it was out of his own pocket, he'd probably spend $1,000 maybe. I don't know. It wouldn't be 10. So these ministers, they take liberty.
Exactly. No, that is the key point. And the thing is, Charlie, they told us time and again that they were going to be different. So I hear what you're saying, but the problem is they decided to make Boris Johnson's personal life a political issue. That was the choice of the Labour Party to do that. They described his personal life as disgusting. They spoke about it all the time. So unfortunately, Labour changed the rules. The MSM changed the rules. So I'm now not going to change the rules back just because they are in power. But look, Charlie Sansom, Alex Armstrong, do stand by, because coming up in just one moment, Beth Rigby and Kay Burley out of a job. Would it be kind of me not to celebrate this? Oh, well. In 1 minute, you'll hear what's going on there. But first, football is back. This is the best time of the year, isn't it? We're talking Premier League in the UK, in the US, NFL Sundays, and college football Saturdays. With that comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineup. So this is where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV, making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the guy everyone ridicules in the group chat. But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench. So this is where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in. It acts as your all-in-one grooming playbook. So from keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue ear and nose hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that will keep you looking and feeling like a champ. So let me tell you about it. It's a great product. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster. With precise trimming capabilities, it's reliable, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for a date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. And we're looking at right now the Weed Whacker 2.0, and that is a product that is just so good. Just trust me on that. Now, the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't stop at grooming essentials. It comes with 2 free gifts, the Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag, premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide. I'm one of them who trusts Manscaped, and get ready for kickoff by heading over to manscaped.com. What you need to do is when you check out of the website, use the code Outspoken and you get 20% off and free shipping. So let me repeat the address, www.manscaped.com. Enter the code Outspoken at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. Stay on top of your grooming game and be ready for anything the season throws your way. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.